The handsome and popular stage and television favorite, Darren McGavin.
Hi there, and this is my partner, Peggy Wright, from Montgomery, Alabama. And we're all here to play Password.
For centuries, mankind has told stories about the masquerade, beings living on the fringes of society, remaining undetected as the ones that go bump in the night while the average person slumbers, ignorant to the true identities of those that walk among them. While mere creations of fiction, these entities have already infiltrated our daily lives. Television, movies, plays, video games, the amount of media that features these secretive monsters and their cohorts are littered about freely for our consumption. But there was one particular show that gave the trope the kickstart it needed, perhaps one of the most forgotten but important pieces of art in television horror. Near midnight, October 31st, 1970, Jeffrey Grant Rice, author, editor, and journalist, had just finished working on his novel, The Kolchak Papers. The story detailed the adventures of Las Vegas newspaper reporter Carl Kolchak, assigned to a story that leads him into a chance encounter with serial killer and vampire Janos Skorzeny. Despite the novel's manuscript being finished, the novel went unpublished after completion, as Rice struggled to find a publisher willing to purchase the draft. While Rice was still struggling to find a publisher, literary agent Rick Ray got his hands on a draft and made contact with representatives from ABC. Ray was best known at the time as agent to science fiction author Richard Matheson. After making contact, ABC expressed interest in purchasing the manuscript to make a film adaptation. Acting on Rice's behalf, a client whom he had not signed yet, Ray allowed ABC to option the manuscript, a process that creates a contract between a production company and an author for a temporary period of time. Acquiring rights to the novel, ABC then contracted Richard Matheson to adapt the book into the screenplay that would later become the television film The Night Stalker. However, while all the dealings were going on behind the scenes, Rice remained oblivious in regards to his manuscript status, believing that he had yet to find a buyer. It wasn't until film production began developing further that Rice found himself trapped in a deal that he had no input in, let alone one made of his own accord. The Night Stalker retold the story of the novel, with only minor convenience changes made for the transition to film. The main character of Carl Kolchak was portrayed by Broadway and film actor Darren McGavin. Other noticeable cast members included Barry Atwater as Skorzeny and Simon Oakland as Kolchak's boss, Tony Vincenzo. The film opens with Kolchak sitting in a hotel room, listening to dictations he had taken earlier that day, a trope that would reappear in later Kolchak media. The reporter is assigned a story dealing with a string of serial murders that have taken place in Las Vegas, where the victims have been drained of blood, a sign that ports suspicion towards Janos Skorzeny, who committed similar strings of murders in the past. Encouraged by his girlfriend Gail Foster, Carol Lindley, Kolchak investigates the history of different folklore before concluding that Skorzeny is a vampire.
Mr. Jenks, you seem to be running this show. Could I have a minute to say something?
Mr. Kolchak, you have the floor.
Kolchak, you keep it short.
I was at the hospital yesterday, and a lot of things were happening that you just simply cannot explain away. Sheriff, your own men shot at him, some at point-blank range. How come it didn't even slow him down? How come a man over 70 years old can outrun a police car? How come the same man, when slugged in the head, doesn't even bleed? Now, I saw those gashes in his head, and whatever was trickling down from those wounds, it was clear. It was
now, this guy's got a motor mouth. Can't we shut him up?
No, let him hang himself. Then we'll finally be rid of him.
So far, he has killed 4, probably 5 women. Now, the coroner said that those bite marks on the throat were made by human teeth. He practically confirmed the fact that he actually drank their blood. Now, wait, whatever the Skorzeny may be, he seemed to be functioning as if he were a vampire. Now, you can go on operating as if he were an ordinary man. That's up to you. But I know that the only way you're going to get him is if you proceed under the assumption that he's a real live vampire.
Kolchak attempts to persuade the police that his conclusion is right, but is left to chase after Skorzeny on his own.
Are you suggesting that we pound one of these into Skorzeny's chest?
No, into his heart.
Eventually defeating the killer by pushing him onto a flight of stairs exposed to sunlight and driving a wooden stake through his heart, Kolchak is run out of town, and all the evidence pointing towards Skorzeny's vampirism is destroyed by the authorities. The film was an immediate success, receiving ratings higher than any other made-for-television film of that year. In what could only be described as painful irony for Rice, the success secured a publisher for the Kolchak Papers manuscript, seeing it being published the same year with the cover featuring images of McGavin as Kolchak. Even with the film being a hit, Rice still received no credit for creating the property in press releases and ads. The overwhelming success of the film prompted ABC to hurriedly commission Matheson to write a sequel script while they still owned the rights to the property, disregarding any objections from Rice. The Night Strangler aired on January 16, 1973 as a sequel to The Night Stalker, seeing McGavin reprising his role as Kolchak. The film follows Kolchak now living in Seattle after the events of the first film, who was hired by his now former editor Tony Vincenzo, once again played by Simon Oakland. Vincenzo hires Kolchak to cover a string of murders that appear similar to those left behind by Skorzeny. Partnering with newspaper archivist Titus Barry, played by Wallace Cox, the two discover that similar cases of serial murders had been reported in past decades, with each one taking place approximately 21 years from one another. The two later connect these cases to Dr. Malcolm Richard Anderson, a figure with reports of his existence dating back to the United States Civil War. Once again, the reporter tries to convince his editor to no avail.
Don't say it. I don't want to hear it.
What about the broken necks and the rotted flesh in the throats of the three
I
victims?
told you I didn't want to hear it. Besides, it's not official.
Not official? Who cares whether it's official or not?
Look,
you know it and I know it.
I'll buy the possibility that some guy, a killer that strangled the 6 women in 1952. But a man, Carl, not some kind of super dead man.
That's the way he has been described more than once.
I don't care if he's been described that way more than twice. Let me finish my life.
Where are you going?
Kolchak and Barry then discover Dr. Richards has been killing these victims to create an immortality elixir in order to elongate his life, draining the victim's blood as one of the ingredients.
Suppose an elixir of life could actually be produced. How do you think it would work? I mean, do you think that one treatment of it would cause everlasting youth? Or do you think that periodic treatments might be required, say...
Wait a minute. Don't tell me. Let me guess. Every 21 years?
Good guess.
With little support outside of Barry and a showgirl named Louise, Joanne Flugg, the reporter is left to his own devices to stop the killer before he can complete his elixir again. The sequel received high ratings as well, leading ABC to immediate consideration of a third movie. During this time, Rice was commissioned by the network to write the novelization of The Night Strangler, which was published later the following year. Regardless of the film's success, production had grown into a strenuous and hostile environment. For both films, creator of the horror soap opera Dark Shadows, Dan Curtis, had been brought on, producing the first and directing the sequel. As filming for The Night Strangler began to wrap, Curtis began directing undeserved anger towards the crew. Taking note of this abuse of staff, McGavin stepped in, confronting Curtis before quitting, exclaiming, quote, "You've got enough film, make your movie, goodbye," end quote. Ignoring the bad blood left between McGavin and Curtis, ABC continued the development of a third movie. This third movie in the tentative Kolchak trilogy was based off an unpublished story Matheson had written, with the draft being later refined into a script with the help of horror author William F. Nolan. This prospective third movie would have been titled The Night Killers, seeing Kolchak and Vincenzo stumble into a conspiracy involving alien-created androids killing and replacing prominent government figures to form a new colony on Earth. Ultimately, the completed script was scrapped, as ABC had set their sights on a more ambitious, and hopefully more long-lived, project for the property: a television series. With the plans to turn the Kolchak property into a TV series, ABC partnered with Universal Television Studios, gaining access to equipment better suited for filming an ongoing series. This partnership also gave ABC access to film on stages in Universal Studios, where a large majority of scenes were shot. Hesitant to return to the role at first, Darren McGavin agreed to reprise his role as Kolchak after negotiations earned him a role as executive producer. a role that he would later learn he was never credited under. Once again ignored by ABC and Universal, Rice was never informed of the series' creation, only learning about it after reading the April 24th, 1974 issue of Daily Variety magazine. Even though Rice's hastily thrown together contract had forbid ABC from creating a series without his express permission, Rice attempted to work with the studio, coercing them into retroactively paying him for the rights rather than pursuing legal action straight away. As the first few episodes of the series were nearing completion, the studios continued to ignore the author, causing Rice to pursue soft legal action, with his lawyer requesting that Universal and ABC settle the matter once and for all. Taking this legal pursuit as a threat, the two studios subsequently banned Rice from entering the filming lots at Universal Studios and canceled a novelization contract that would have assured his next 5 books be published with support from Universal and ABC. This poor treatment led Rice to take more aggressive measures, threatening to sue the two parties. Under pressure from this more serious threat, ABC attempted to compromise and made the decision to include Rice's name in the credits as the series creator, quelling the threat of more severe legal action for the time being. Even with the conflict between the studios and Rice taking place, the first 4 episodes of the new series made their way to air, starting September 13th and lasted through October 4th, 1974, under the series name The Night Stalker. These 4 episodes, The Ripper, The Zombie, They Have Been, They Are, They Will Be, and The Vampire, were met with above-average ratings. The show took heavy inspiration from the films before it, following a Monster of the Week formula that saw Kolchak encountering some sort of supernatural entity each episode while investigating a seemingly normal news story. The series saw Kolchak living in Chicago, working as a reporter for a branch of the independent news service, INS, with Tony Vincenzo, Simon Oakland, and other reporters and columnists such as Ron Updike, Jack Greenidge, and Emily Cowles, Ruth McDevitt. The character of Kolchak was kept the same for the most part, retaining his bumbling tenacity that allowed him to fumble into the truth, often through pure luck. The structure of the episodes stayed heavily formulaic for the duration of the series. Each episode would start off with the theme song before transitioning into a scene narrated by Kolchak or a scene where he is recording notes pertaining to the episode. This narration would set up the premise for the episode, giving the date, time, and location for the inciting incident caused by the episode's monster.
Admittedly, the story you're about to read is bizarre, incredible. Those of you who wish to avoid being unsettled, who wish to avoid thinking, will label it insane. And though you, the reader, would find these facts almost impossible to substantiate, that does not change their nature. Facts they are. I know. I saw them happen. Yellowstone County, Montana, December 11th. Horrified local authorities investigated the gruesome deaths of 4 area residents, the Rockwell family, mother, father, and 2 children. All had been discovered strewn around their isolated farm, their bodies mutilated. An official coroner's report stated they had been dead 3 days. Cause of death, attacked by wolves. Fact, the last sighting of a wolf in Yellowstone County occurred in 1948. Fact, in the entire history of this continent, there has never been one documented case of attack by wolves on a human being.
The remainder of an episode's duration would usually switch between Kolchak's investigative work, interactions in the INS office, and the discovery and following confrontation with the monster. Following the airing of the 4th episode, The Vampire, in which the reporter confronts one of Scorzeny's victims turned vampire, the series went on a month-long hiatus as scheduling changes were made to accompany ABC's show roster. The 5th episode, The Werewolf, premiered on November 1st, 1974, seeing the return of the show in a new time slot under a new name, Kolchak, the Night Stalker. From this point, the series continued its 20-episode run, but suffered from poor ratings due to its new 10 p.m. time slot on Friday nights, a time slot that barred younger viewers from accessible viewing. The next year, the show was canceled, publicly citing lower ratings, but a lack of interest from the cast and crew, particularly McGavin, also contributed to the show's demise. As Kolchak ran its course, McGavin began to grow tired of the Monster of the Week formula that came with creating a television series, preferring the series had stayed as a film franchise. Along with his growing boredom on the show, McGavin would grow more frustrated with ABC and Universal as he still remained uncredited for his producer role and had little to no producing duties. In February of 1975, a few months before the final episode of the season was supposed to air, McGavin approached ABC about canceling the show or at the very least releasing him from his contract deal. The decision was made to free McGavin from his contract, canceling the show early and shorting the series' first and only season by 2 episodes. The final episode, This Century, aired March 28th of that year. A few months before the series' cancellation, Rice had continued his legal pursuits against ABC and Universal, properly suing the studios. The legal pursuit dragged on for nearly 9 months, but resulted in a definitive answer as to who owned what property rights. The ruling saw Rice receiving literary rights to the character, while ABC and Universal acquired dramatic rights to the television, films, and series, respectively. This ruling meant that Rice could write further stories about the characters, so long as he did not reference or base ideas off of what had appeared in the televised versions. The same guidelines were applicable to ABC and Universal, with ABC only able to use characters that had appeared in the films, and Universal only able to use characters that had appeared in the series, unable to borrow concepts from one another. In 1976, although the series had been off the air for a few months, 2 new Kolchak movies were released, The Demon and the Mummy and Crackle of Death. Unfortunately for fans, the films were revealed to be composed of cut-together episodes of the series that had already aired, with only a few new lines of additional narration from McGavin to create a seemingly more cohesive, overarching story. The Demon and the Mummy was cut together from episodes 16 and 17, Demon in Lace and Legacy of Terror, whereas Crackle of Death was composed of episodes 6 and 10, Firefall and Energy Eater. The Kolchak franchise remained dormant for the next few years before the CBS television network purchased off-network syndication rights for Kolchak the Night Stalker from Universal, allowing reruns to air on the CBS network. On May 25, 1979, as part of the CBS Late Movie program, the 4th episode, The Vampire, was aired to test viewer reception. Receiving high ratings, CBS made the decision to pull the reruns from the summer schedule and delay the rebroadcasts for the fall season, where it was thought that it would bring in even more viewers than before. CBS continued to broadcast the rest of the series episodes as part of the CBS Late Movie program, a venture that proved so successful that Kolchak the Night Stalker would find itself rebroadcast on the same program again in 1981 and 1987. Yet throughout the reruns, the series would always find itself shorted by 4 episodes. For unknown reasons, even though Universal had allowed CBS to broadcast the series, they held back rights to the 4 episodes used to create the 2 compilation films. Because of this issue, the 4 missing episodes would go unaired until the series made its way to home VHS release in 1996. The Kolchak series would find a temporary home on a few other networks for reruns, but any future developments for the property remained silent, aside from Rice's release of a new Kolchak novel, Grave Secrets, in 1994 and a graphic novel in 2003. In 2005, ABC rebooted the series under the simplified title of Night Stalker, with Stuart Townsend as Kolchak and Cotter Smith as Tony Vincenzo. The first episode aired September 29th, with only 6 out of 10 episodes airing in total, the 6th episode airing November 10th. The last 4 episodes in the series were later released as digital exclusives on iTunes in February of 2006. Many of the lower ratings were associated with the much darker tone that the show had, now becoming a serialized drama following Kolchak as a reporter for the LA Beacon, uncovering underlying conspiracies that he believes are connected to his wife's murder.
In nightmares, they intrude from places beyond our imagining. Demons, monsters, killers, who strike with no remorse or reason. In our waking hours, we look over our shoulder, out the corner of our eye, alert to the stranger who might attack without warning. But in all our lives, there is a greater danger, one even more terrifying for being unexpected.
The series still kept elements of the supernatural, but as it was supposed to be long-running, the exposition was slowly built up to bide time rather than being monster of the week. After Night Stalker's failure, ABC retired the Kolchak property yet again. In the years after, Moonstone Books, the publisher of the original Kolchak graphic novel, released 2 short fiction anthologies titled The Night Stalker Chronicles and The Night Stalker Casebook. Along with the 2 anthologies, the publisher also released several novels for the property between 2007 and 2012, with each release under approval from Rice. In May of 2012, it was also reported that Disney was supposedly working on a film adaptation, as the Walt Disney Corporation owned ABC, and therefore the accompanying rights to the Kolchak property. It was reported that the film would star Johnny Depp and be directed by Edgar Wright, yet aside from a few sporadic news releases dating up to 2017, no further insight has been released in regards to the project's status. To say Kolchak the Night Stalker had a lasting influence on horror in television would be an understatement. The influence of both the films and the series can be seen in modern-day television on shows like Twin Peaks, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and most certainly The X-Files. In regards to his show's creation, creator of The X-Files, Chris Carter, once stated, quote, "I just wanted to do something as scary as I remember the Night Stalker when I was in my teens," end quote. Kolchak the Night Stalker is truly something unique, as it has pulled off its own masquerade. While dozens of films and television shows are released, that subtle, underlying influence of Kolchak can still be seen, although the originator may not be.